Hello, everyone, and welcome to the anchor session of CME Palooza Spring. I am Scott Kober, one of the co-producers of CME Palooza, and I would like to welcome you to this session. This is kind of a repeat of one of our more popular sessions. It's actually the fourth time that we're using this format. This is called Common and Not So Common Case Conundrums in CME. This session is sponsored by PER, Physicians Education Resources. So we have dueling moderators. We have two teams of folks that are going to be talking through cases today. Our first moderator is Phil Talamo. Phil is the president of PER. And we also have Alana Hardesty, the program manager of CME at Boston University School of Medicine, who you guys will be seeing shortly. So a few housekeeping items to run through before we start this session. First of all, as we do before all of our sessions, I would like to thank our sponsors, our gold sponsors, Daiichi Sankyo, Academic CME, and PER, Physician Education Resources. Silver sponsors, Pure Audience, Clinical Care Options and Practicing Clinicians Exchange, Medscape Education. And our bronze sponsors, PBI, Catalyst Medical Education, CMEology, the Academy for Continued Healthcare Learning, Vindigo Medical Education, Paradigm Medical Communications, Postgraduate Institute for Medicine, Global Education Group, CE Outcomes, Integrity CE, RMEI, Helio CME, Infograph Ed, Med Learning Group, Primary Care Network, Prova Education, and Red Med Ed. So there are two ways to ask questions during this and all CME Palooza sessions. You can use the Peer Audience text line to send in a question to 267-6660-CME, or you could tweet your question to us using the CME Palooza hashtag. So we will be using Poll Everywhere, our audience response technology throughout the session. Hopefully you guys have been seeing it throughout the day. So to access Poll Everywhere, you can download the app, join the presentation titled CME Palooza 000, or type the following URL in a web browser, www.polleverywhere.com/CME Palooza 000. Finally, our speaker disclosure. The opinions, discussions, and or conclusions expressed are those of our panelists and do not represent an endorsement by or position of their employer, parent company, or affiliates. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Phil to introduce the other two members of his panel.
Excellent. Thanks, Scott. My name is Phil Talamo. I'm the president of PER, which is the accredited CME division under MGH Life Sciences. I'm very happy to be here and talking through this exciting session, the common and not so common case conundrums in CME. I'd like to take a quick minute and introduce our panelists. And one of the things that I've always had a lot of fun doing here with our group over the past month or so, as we've all been in this isolation and social distancing, so I always ask someone to share a little bit of good news. What's a piece of good news that's sort of happened for you in the last little bit? So first up, I'd like to introduce Jim Palatine, who's the president of PTCE, also under MGH Life Sciences. Jim?
Good afternoon. Thank you. You want my piece of good news, Phil?
I'd love to hear your good news.
Okay. First of all, the good news is that I'm here as a panelist with you and Tina. And the second part of the good news, I'll keep it real simple, is my internet is working spot on today, and I don't expect or anticipate dropping off, which is good news for me as it's been spotty the past 2 days.
I think that's great. You could have stopped after the first one, but I like the second one was just as good. I'd also like to introduce Tina Stacy, who's the Chief Strategy Officer over at Clinical Care Options. Tina.
Hi, everyone. So my bit of good news is obviously everyone's planted wherever they are planted currently. And in that vein, I've planted my garden behind my house, vegetable garden, and the rabbits haven't eaten it yet.
That's better than good news. I'll give you some food if you don't go to the grocery store, wear a mask.
Exactly. It's going to be a few months, truly.
Excellent. And I'm happy to have both of you here on the panel. I think that this is great. I just realized as we were queuing this up that you're both pharmacists, which is really exciting. I feel, like I'm in good company. So let's jump right into it. We'll go through case one. So, of course, we have our COVID case here. So this is a challenging one. Prior to the COVID-19 era, you were quite pleased that your CME company, the U.S. Mector Prize, was able to secure grant funding for a live satellite symposium and accompanying online enduring component at the American Cardiology Association of America annual meeting in July 2020. That's a pretty prestigious meeting and a big deal. The two supporters that each provided 50% of the overall fund, Broadway Pharmaceuticals and Antarctic Therapeutics, both located on two different cities there. As we all know, face-to-face meetings for the next several months has been canceled, and the ACCME conference is no different, quickly shifting to an online virtual format. Consequently, your organization is meeting to decide how to reformat your funded program and then submit a compelling change of scope request. You know, many people in the grant department at Broadway Pharmaceuticals, they have historically been a willing, active communicator, a long-time participant in the CME Palooza activities, and they really understand the challenges facing MECs right now. They're very encouraging of compliant communications with providers looking to rescope previously approved initiatives. However, at Antarctic Therapeutics, you can guess where they're located. They're at the opposite end of the spectrum. They have not returned any voicemails. All efforts to reach someone on email have been met with the same automated response. If any activity is not going to be delivered in the format laid out in the proposal, a formal change of scope must be submitted to the grants department via our main department email to be reviewed by the grants committee. It's a tough one. So, of course, you don't want to lose the funding that's been awarded. You certainly don't want to miss out on providing that education to the audience out there, but you're really stumped on what's the right approach to take. So, without further ado.
Okay. Without further ado, let me switch it over to our ARS.
So what would you do? A, submit a change of scope request to Broadway Pharmaceuticals and wait to hear about their approval before submitting to Antarctic. B, submit a change of scope to Antarctic Therapeutics first and wait for their response before submitting to Broadway. C, submit them both at the same time. And D, submit simultaneously but mention nothing to each other. I hope there's more than 3 people voting here. 4. All right, we see it dancing a little bit.
Phil, you should be singing.
I have the guitar. It didn't make it into the screen. It's over there, actually.
All right.
No.
That's pretty good. So, of course, I have to say, right, like, you know, what's being said is not reflective of PER, PTCE, or CCO, but we've got a very experienced panel. Jim, why don't you start off? Tell us what you would do, you think?
I'd probably follow what the audience has done, either C or D. Submit simultaneously, and whether you decide to share that the approval is contingent on one approving or not, you won't necessarily know that until the final amounts are approved and you get the final communication from both funders. I know, with this current environment, there's funders that are modifying approvals and approval amounts based on what the budget is. So I would say C or D would be what we do, and the communication with both funders need to be in parallel and need to occur consistently. And I assume that Broadway will probably give you a quicker response. And I think being truthful and honest with where you stand with the other funder is an approach you need to take. And then I would say that there needs to be a set date in mind where you go or no go, and communicate to Broadway that you have funding or you don't have funding, and you can move forward.
Tina, do you agree? Would you take a different approach, you think?
I couldn't have said it any better. So I would go with C. And I think transparency is key. So providing information to both funders. I would assume that the budget that you built supporting the change of scope, it would be inclusive of both funding supporters. And so it really depends on both of them coming to the table to approve a change of scope. And just having that open communication so that if Antarctic does not move by your go, no-go date, then you have that, you've already teed that up with the other supporter.
Makes sense to me. So let's think a little bit about what change of scope might look like. I know I've said that it's kind of hard to mirror the live experience virtually, and everybody sort of says webcast. What sort of factors are you weighing when you're putting together a change of scope that you're really trying to mirror that live educational experience, or is that impossible? Can you not even mirror the live experience? Jim, what would you say?
I think there's probably three things you consider. Number one is the target audience. Are you reaching the target audience that the original goal intended? So if you're a large association meeting and you know that the attendees are going to have a certain specialty or subspecialty, then we need to go with a platform where you're reaching those individuals. The second thing is the audience response. Are you able to get the audience response and interaction through ARS, pre-test, post-test, that you would normally have in the room? And then the third consideration is, how is the activity designed? Was it a more of a didactic presentation, more one way, or was there interaction? And if you look at a platform that can include the interactive component where there's a discussion back and forth, and there's a number of different equally strong platforms out there. There's some leaders in certain areas, and if you want to go with if you had designed an interactive panel discussion, you have to select a partner in technology that's able to deliver on that. So those are probably the three things that I would consider.
Tina, anything to add?
Along the lines of faculty, I think you have to have consideration that if we're doing virtual online education, how can that faculty bring in those learners? So it's an as if you were there type of experience. I think that's important. You also need to think about the context of the education you're providing. If the education was more skills-based, is that conducive to an online educational format? I think it would depend on the education you're providing, of course, but that's something to bring into consideration as well.
Good point.
I totally agree. So how about when you're kind of going after the B word, budget, and you're looking at rescoping a satellite? Obviously, we know that the American Cardiology Association of America is pretty expensive. So if you're going to rescope that into a webcast, it could be a pretty expensive webcast. How are you approaching a budget on something like this, especially when you're looking at potentially bringing in some outside technological partners? Tina, what would you do?
Well, there are budgetary savings, as you can imagine, with regard to travel. So we have to take those into consideration. But again, it's all that transparency. So as you're putting together your change of scope budget, that you have to put all those pieces and parts into consideration. And oftentimes you're precluded you're within that bucket and whatever that is. And so you want to make sure that the education you're providing is in line with the original educational program, of course, and that it's conducive, but that's the art of what we do.
Jim, what do you think? Is that the art of making the deal? Couldn't help myself.
Absolutely. Most important thing is the transparency. And budgets are always a tough part, and but you have to share what the funding amounts, and it looks like this case there's 50-50. So that's I don't know if that's always reality, but in this case, that's great. It's 50-50, and you bring in a technology partner, and those costs may offset what you had considered in, let's say, an AV vendor on site. There's some probably savings when you go to a online, but there's also sometimes additional costs that occur. And as I said before, I think you have to give the funders an opportunity to change as well. They're going through a lot of changes, and if Antarctica is a smaller company that is going through a lot of changes within their organization based on what we're seeing right now, they may need to pull back and may not be able to fund the same amount. And I think anytime you do a change of scope, you need to consider the circumstances that the funders are going through too. And I think what has opened my eyes in the past 4 weeks is that we're all humans, and we're all trying to do the right thing, but our circumstances change, and sometimes funding levels can change, and so you need to be open to that. And when we're doing this, there's at-risk funds, but at the end of the day, you have a dollar amount in mind of what you're able to deliver this, and you hopefully get to that point. If not, you work with the funder to figure out the best option.
You know, Phil, one more thing for consideration regarding budget is, I'm assuming, perhaps inappropriately, that there was a satellite fee that was paid into the Congress or the conference. So is that money going to be returned back to the provider? Because that could be additional budget that could then be applied to your change of scope and your planning.
I think that's a great point. We all know that the American Cardiology Association of America is one of the more expensive slot fees, so you probably have a little bit of wiggle room in there. Last question before
assuming they took it, they took it back.
We'll see. So last question before we move on to the final case here, or the next case. So we'll talk a little bit about communication, both from a supporter standpoint, but also the society. How much are you communicating with the supporter? And maybe are you providing one of those change of scopes that has a few different options as you go through? Jim, why don't you start out?
It's fine. My feeling is that the funders want you to have your best case scenario and a recommendation in line. So while there's certain contingencies, and I think one of the things that we've done over the past 30 days is provided a change of scope, but then within a week that needs to be changed again, and you're rescoping that again. But I think having a thoughtful plan and knowing that that plan might need to be modified a bit, and it's you can no longer have a person drive by car to meet at a studio, for instance. They now have to do it from their homes. I think that needs to be considered, and so the the funder needs to be aware of that. And then you asked a question about the association. Associations, there are different levels. Some are doing a virtual program and still providing it as if it's happening live and in person. Some are canceling altogether, and the MECs are on their own, and others are doing e-learning days. So it's across the board.
Tina, what would you say?
I don't think I can say it any better. I'm a firm believer in, as experts in educational design, as providers should be, that we should be putting our best and most appropriate educational format and plan in front of the supporter. Contingency plan could be, if supporter A and B do not come into support, then here would be what this program would look like in that case. But otherwise, I don't believe in kind of try this. Let's tell them what the best educational format is and put that in front of the supporters.
I like that. Well said. What do you think, Scott? Ready for the second case?
Yep.
So I'm going to skip that first sentence. I'm tired of coronavirus and COVID-19. So let's pretend we're on a different planet, and nobody has even heard of coronavirus. They've never drank a Corona in their life. Let's talk about. But of course they still get cancer. So your organization on this new planet has been closely following a new cancer agent, Innovatimab, which is being developed by a small biotech called Shazam Oncology. Pretty good name. So it's for a very specific type of lung cancer. This is really one of the core areas of your company where you focus on. So they're a very small company with a pretty small staff, and they're trying to commercialize their drug very independently and trying to just bring it out on their own. And their initial foray into the med ed space has been sent out by an RFP that hits your inbox. The RFP says that they want one proposal that focuses on oncologists, oncology nurses, and oncology pharmacists, with options for combinations of live and online interventions over the next 18 months. That's a pretty wide target audience. So in the RFP, they said they only want to fund one proposal, but they're encouraging collaboration amongst providers to ensure that all the target audiences are effectively reached. I think that's the key word. While there's no financial cap, the CEO of Shazam Oncology has to actually sign off on the LOA, so they want it to be as reasonably priced as possible. And of course, in a typical small biotech realm, this RFP is due in 2 weeks.
All right, let me shift over to the ARS.
Oncology moves fast. 2 weeks is a lifetime.
It's true.
So what approach would you take? Would you submit a grant proposal without any formal collaborators, but mentions the names of them in the proposal without their knowledge? Bring them on board afterwards. Make maybe a few phone calls to 2 or 3 collaborators, get their buy-in on a rough concept, but submit it without any formally named people. C, sign any formal agreements with the partners and then submit it with a formal collaboration in place, but then you take the lead and really quarterback this. Or would you say that everything in option C, but the grant is designed and submitted with an equal partnership amongst everybody?
Cue the singing.
I've been singing a lot because I've been, by myself for 6 weeks here.
Phil, I like the names. That's creative.
Well, Shazam was one of those great movies that was for free on the United East to West route for a while.
It was terrible.
I know Tina's
terrible.
time. She's on that pretty often.
Okay.
On there, fine.
All right, so let's jump into it. So, Tina, I want to hear from you first. You're one of the great collaborators in the CME space.
Thanks. So I actually picked C, which no one in the polling picked C. So I feel a bit of a lone ranger here. So I'm hoping that
You're a little bit of a trailblazer. That's okay.
So the reason I picked C is I think it's important that, first of all, I don't want to put your name in a grant that you have no clue that I just did that to you. I feel like after the fact would be just awkward, personally. And I do think there needs to be open communication amongst potential collaborators on what they're doing in this particular grant. So first step for me is to take a step back, look what's in the RFP, assess the educational need and verify that independently as well, and look at our internal organization, who we can effectively educate and reach, and then who are potential collaborators and reach out to them and really decide who's. I think there has to be a quarterback. Somebody has to submit that grant. Someone has to certify the content. So there does need to be, I'm going to call it a lead, someone to take that ownership, but roles and responsibilities need to be defined up front. Otherwise, I feel like it is not even controlled chaos. It is chaos.
Jim, what do you think?
You know what? I think
I'm a Jets guy. I think it's Tim Tebow.
I don't know what you're thinking, Phil. Tina and I are thinking along the same lines. I had also picked C, and I think you need to have those agreements in place. The 2-week timeline does throw a little wrench into that, in that you need to get it done quicker. And so I can see and understand why folks go with B. You get the buy-in, and then in order to, you don't have time to get the formal written agreements, but you have to talk about what the roles are and whether that's in an email or have that discussion and understanding. But to Tina's point, and everyone's been involved in in college, project where it's a team-based project. And you know what? If you let the group take the lead, sometimes no one takes the lead. So you have to step in and, I think, assume the lead in many cases. And if this is something that is in your sweet spot and you need a couple groups to be involved, that you offer to take the lead, and that's where the 2-week time frame comes into play too. You're much more efficient if there's one person that takes the lead and is able to move things forward. So I would say C in this case, but I could be, based on the timeline, persuaded with B.
I think you make a lot of good points, and I'll defend you and say that I would also have picked C, but I couldn't vote on it because I was too busy reading and trying to think of a song to sing. So let me talk a little bit about these 3 target audiences, right? So you've got oncologists, you've got nurses, you've got pharmacists, and if your organization is really an expert in one of those, how do you look out and evaluate expertise in a potential collaborator if that's not exactly the area that you're practicing in? Jim, why don't you take this one first?
And and hopefully this is not the first time that you're evaluating, collaborating in those other spaces. So if you're a strong provider of education, physicians, that you've done other activities and you have those that other group of collaborators, I think that group of collaborators come from word of mouth. I think talking to your funders, finding out who does expert work in those other disciplines, whether it's pharmacy, nursing, physicians. I trust the funders; they know and they are able to share. The other is you build relationships, whether it's at the Alliance or over the years. You talk when you're seeing your colleagues, and you find out where their strong sense are. You do a individual capabilities presentation to each other, but you have your small, close group of groups that you collaborate with, and you communicate with them. And hopefully, this isn't the first time that you're working with them, because it does take time to work together and build that trust.
Tina, what do you think?
I agree. I think what was very intriguing about the case is that this therapeutic area is in your wheelhouse. And as a result, I feel like, we know who our neighbors are. We know who others who are in the therapeutic areas that provide education as we do. And so I would trust and hope that we would have, at least in our back pocket, some ideas of collaborators. So it's not too far-fetched to be able to pick up the phone and say, who wants to collaborate on this particular program?
I like that. And this is an interesting one with working together. And I think we said a few different key things that are pretty good take-home points for me. I love, Jim, that you said accountability. We've all heard that sort of business acumen where you say, if more than one person's accountable, nobody's accountable. I think there always has to be somebody that's taking the lead on this. And Tina, you said the word quarterback. That made me think of Tim Tebow, who we all know is one of the all-time great quarterbacks out there. You have to be quarterbacking this relationship and having everybody work together for it to work, especially if you've got 2 weeks to go. Somebody's got to hold some feet to the fire to hit the deadline. So let's go around here in the last minute with final thoughts. Tina, any final thoughts on either of these cases that we put together?
Well, my final thoughts are that I'm so appreciative that these were completely hypothetical and have no basis in reality of today. Sorry.
Jim?
Yeah, no,
That's
sarcasm is good. That's this is the first time Tina and I are working together in this format, and I appreciate the sarcasm on that. But I agree, these activities are what we deal with every day. We've become experts in negotiating and going through things, and I think Tina said it earlier. It's the open and honest communication with our funders, how we get through it.
Well put.
Totally agree. And I think that collaboration is a great opportunity. There's plenty of groups out there that can do it. All you need to do is take a look through the CME Palooza sponsor pages, and you'll find one or two.
Well, thank you for that promotion, Phil. And I want to thank the three of you guys for getting this session off to a good start. So we're actually going to say goodbye to Phil and Jim and Tina, and we are going to bring in our hospital academic team, which is being moderated by Alana Hardesty from Boston University. And I'm going to let Alana get us started, and she's going to pass the baton to the remaining faculty members to introduce themselves.
Fabulous. Thank you, Scott. And I'm delighted to be here. I'm a last-minute sub for my boss, Julie White. She's sorry she had to miss this. We're all really glad to be here in the home stretch, and I know that if I could see the audience's faces, they would all be bright-eyed and bushy-tailed still here at 4:30 in the afternoon on a beautiful sunny spring day here in the Northeast at any rate. Let me allow Elizabeth Franklin and Beta Zakari to introduce themselves. Elizabeth, do you want to go first?
Sure. I'm Elizabeth Franklin. I am at the University of Mississippi Medical Center in Jackson. And I am faculty in the Doctor of Health Administration program, completely online program. Anybody want to go into hospital administration or leadership? I also am involved in CPD all across campus. For a little over 4 years, I was the director of continuing health professional education here and have transitioned to faculty, but it's still am very involved in that area.
Great, thank you. Beta?
Hi, I am Beta Zachary. I am the Director of Continuing Medical Education at Indiana University School of Medicine.
Great, thank you. Okay, excuse me. It's just a regular cough. It's just allergies. I'm going to jump right in to our first case, which of course is COVID related. And this is the segue into sort of the hospital academic CME part of this session. So hard to believe it's only 5 weeks ago since we all went virtual and ended up at home. And the clinicians at the hospital are beginning to prepare for surges in COVID-19. In the last week together, we huddled with everybody constantly, and we were making constant decisions about canceling and refunding and postponing and transitioning and so forth, trying to figure out how we're going to get these things done. Now we're sort of 5 weeks in, we've settled in, and we have a new normal of morning Zoom check-ins every day, and we're hitting the pause button on some projects while the faculty isn't available, but we're sort of sitting here wondering what we can do to help the folks that are on the front lines at our associated hospital. So our RSS manager notes that several series have continued during the current crisis. They're incorporating COVID-19 content into their curriculum, including in the pediatrics and GIM departments. Not at all a surprise, and not surprising, we're still having to sort of jump in and make sure everything is remaining in compliance. So we get an email from the dean. He forwards it along, and it was from the head of the GIM department. It says, we're planning a CME program for this Friday that will involve a variety of speakers discussing aspects of caring for patients with COVID-19. The slide deck for the program is not yet approved, as one of our presenters currently serves on a Pfizer advisory board. Can you advise how we should be addressing this issue to keep the presenter on the agenda? Upon a further investigation, we discover that per the conflict of resolution policy in the office, our RSS process has requested that the GIM head review the potential conflict and resolve it. But we're wondering, you know, this is happening Friday, today's Wednesday, how we can deal with this if we can go through it and figure out how to do it in a way that's compliant, but if we can maybe relax some of the standards. What do we do?
All right, let me get the ARS question up here.
Okay, so how do we respond to this situation? These answers are long. I will read them though. Send a response directly to the head of GIM, copying the dean, explaining to him that he'll need to review all the slides developed by the faculty member to resolve any conflict of interest. B, call the faculty member in question to further investigate the conflict and attempt to resolve it on your own. C, download the ACCME's planning forum for expedited accredited activities related to COVID-19 to see if that might be helpful. Or D, nothing. You're just too overwhelmed right now to deal with it. Okay. So 55% of you said C. 50, we're still in there. We're still working. What are we doing? Okay. Has anybody looked at the ACCME forum? Is that what you would do? That would be my first step. The ACCME has done some marvelous things and stepped up into the COVID. Elizabeth, do you want to talk about, have you used that forum and dealt with that?
We've not yet, but would love to. It's really a very for lack of a better word, very kind thing to do, because it does make things easier. And as you can imagine, there's no vaccine, there's no drug for this yet. So the possibility of conflict of interest in terms of that, are very, very slim. Unfortunately, I wish we did. So yes, but in this particular case, if you have that form, one of the questions is the group developing its own learning, or is this activity being led by a facilitator or faculty member? So there's a yes or no. But then the next question is there a facilitator or faculty member that is employed or owns a pharmaceutical company or device manufacturer? And then it, of course, says very clearly, if you check yes for that, you need an alternate person to lead the activity. But in this case, the way I looked at it is this person is not the lead. They're a presenter, they're a speaker. And so that would not be an issue in this particular case. The slides do need to be reviewed. And in a normal environment, you would ask, the course director or whoever that might be to review those, peer review those, get his colleagues to do that. But in this case, I would probably suggest that that the CE office do that. I really think this is an environment of compassion for our frontline providers, and I think that would be the best thing to do.
Yeah, that would be sort of where I would go with that as well. As somebody who's on an advisory board isn't an owner or an employee. So they are, that's a hard stop for the ACCME, and they're keeping that in place. But, since there is no vaccine and there is no, anything else, they by definition wouldn't be able to be promotional in any of their, in any of what they're saying. Beta, did you have thoughts about that as well?
Yeah, post COVID-19 era, we're in agreement that with the new ACCME guidelines in response to COVID-19 pandemic, it's safe to assume that there would be no conflict, because this is an unprecedented public health emergency and there are no current preventative or specific treatments. So there is no potential for relevant financial relationship, even if they are on a committee or an advisory board. So my answer is definitely in line with Elizabeth's and yours.
And if this had happened, I don't know, 6 months ago, 2 months ago, 3 months ago, what would you have done differently?
So did you want me to take that?
Sure.
I just jumped in. So pre-COVID era, can we just say pre-COVID-19 era? I just don't know when this era is going to end. So if we could just name it an era and get over that, I can say our first, we would first contact the faculty member in my office to investigate the conflict and what that means. And then if we couldn't resolve it, or we thought, okay, we need to take further steps, then we would send a response to the head of, GIM in this case, copying the dean, to have him review all the slides. In general, it's our practice in our office to have the chair or select committee members to review slides anyway. So we would follow that protocol.
Great. I want to ask a question. This is a little bit, I'm pivoting just a touch here. But since we're kind of talking about RSSs and sort of some of these ongoing things, I'd be curious to know from both of you, Elizabeth and Beta, how your some of these ongoing programs, the regularly scheduled series and so forth, are pivoting to incorporate COVID information.
Yeah, as you might imagine, some are being canceled or postponed until a later date. a better time, a better era. But many are, and especially if they had outside speakers that had to travel or whatever. But many are continuing to have them and using WebEx or Zoom or whatever, some sort of remote format. So they seem to be adapting very well.
And are they incorporating COVID information into some of those regularly scheduled programs, or are they just sort of going on with business as usual? Even when
some of both. Yeah.
Vita, are you finding that as well?
Yeah, we are, our university being a school of medicine, so there's a good response to COVID-19. So there are a lot more activities, educational activities that are coming out to support our healthcare providers that are on the front lines. So we are seeing that, and we are finding them very responsive and eager to have CME accreditation, especially in-house. We are seeing that with a couple of our external clients, but internally, yes, we do see that they're definitely responding to COVID-19.
Great. I just one brief experience from our own office. We just started just last month a Project ECHO program on Huntington's disease, and we met yesterday. And we weren't sure quite how it would go, but what we ended up doing was, instead of having the standard case presentation that would normally be part of a Project ECHO, we simply opened up the floor to talk about the issues that these providers who care for Huntington's disease patients are facing in this era, what they're doing with patients who have impulsivity control issues, how they're getting people tested, what they're doing about physical therapy or occupational therapy, how they're dealing with family groups and so forth. So it was really, really beneficial for the providers in this group to have other people to bounce things off of and to have a moment to sort of reflect and talk through the issues that they're going through with their very, very specialized patient population. So great. Any other thoughts before we move on to part 2? Okay. Scott,
Call it here.
All right.
There we go.
All right. So a few hours later, you get another email from one of the course directors you often work with to plan full day live meetings. She's been asked by several of her colleagues recently, what should we do about our live conference that is scheduled for the fall at that downtown hotel, and wants to know your thoughts. So not in the range of, we don't know what's happening in the fall. You want to do shall we do the IRS, Scott?
Yep.
All right.
Second. There we go.
Okay. So what would you do? Choose all that apply. Would you call the course director to discuss the likelihood of canceling the meeting? Call the hotel immediately and start negotiating cancellation terms? Wait until the state puts out guidance regarding social distancing for the fall months before doing anything? Send out a survey to past meeting participants to find out if they would be interested in an online version of the activity? And or brainstorm with your team about the hybrid online/live options?
Wow.
All right.
Okay, so really interesting. It's people really did choose all that apply. That's awesome. When I was talking with Julie about this morning, her gut instinct, her sense was that bottom one, the one that 36% of people chose, would be the first option. That, yeah, probably all of the above is correct. But the first one would be to sort of talk through what the various options might be, and then move along from there. Beta, any thoughts on your end about what you would do?
Yeah, I really like this question because it's so for our school in particular, we're part of Indiana University under IU School of Medicine. So our decisions must lie within the parameters outlined by the school. So currently in our institution, the directive is that all summer events are either canceled or virtual. So since this activity would be in the fall, we would advise the committee to, number one, for me, is call the hotel immediately and start negotiating cancellation terms. Because we have had some major activities that the attrition for the hotel would be pretty massive for those conferences if they were to go to virtual or cancel. So for me, is get the negotiation. We need to have a cancellation policy within that contract. Then brainstorm with our CME team and the activity committee to talk about hybrid or fully virtual options and the possibilities of having this postponed or cancel. So that brainstorming session needs to be the next step or simultaneous step. Then we would send out a survey. I think that's a great idea. We would send out a survey to past meeting participants to find out if they would be interested in an online version. And in that survey, we would ask, what's the most important aspect of the conference they're concerned about losing if it goes online? Because we want to see how can we facilitate that? What other things that we can come up with if that specific aspect that they're looking for in the conference is going to be missing. Then we'll of course watch for what our state and school puts out with respect to guidelines regarding social distancing and fall month. So those are the steps in those order, I guess, I would take.
Okay, yeah, it all makes sense. Elizabeth?
Yeah, I'm just laughing about that last answer because it's kind of like that old joke we have in the South where if the Sunday school teacher asks the kids, what is fuzzy and climbs a tree and eats nuts, they all yell out Jesus because that's just the answer that you are supposed to give. But so when you say collaborate with your team, that's just always a great answer. But I'm in a very big academic medical center that's very, we have to follow the chain of command. So I would certainly find out, as Beta has it really well because she has a date that she can definitively tell people we can't gather in any kind of event until this date. We haven't been told that yet, but I agree with her. One of my first actions would be to call the hotel just to inquire, or even better, if we sign the contract, look at it and see what that is. So I'm afraid that I would do that first, just for fear that if somebody lost a lot of money, it would be a bad deal. But I would also talk to the people above me, the academic dean or vice chancellor, to see if what we should do. I think I would take counsel from up above. But
we spent a lot of time this spring, and even now still with our Office of General Counsel, trying to figure out getting out of hotel contracts that were already signed. The minute that that the CDC put out guidelines and that our state put out guidelines, we were able to invoke the force majeure. But if you've got a contract signed for the fall, you can't invoke force majeure until something happens for the fall. So it becomes a bit of an issue. In the end, all of the hotels finally, did the right thing. But there were some scary moments where we thought we would be out many tens of thousands of dollars. But yeah, I'm dealing with it now. I've got people just asking me, can we plan stuff for the fall? And it makes me anxious and it's making them anxious and nobody wants to sign anything. So we feel a little bit like we're caught in some quicksand at the minute.
So Alana, we have a question that came over the peer audience text line, which sort of is kind of along the lines, and you were just sort of speaking to is how far out are you guys planning alternates to live in-person meetings at this point?
Wow. I'll let Elizabeth or Beta speak to that first. I'm happy to chime in, but Beta, do you have dates beyond which you are planning?
We have a definitive date. Definitely everything during the summer has to be canceled or go virtual. We do not have a definitive date of when we can resume social gatherings or activities. That's what we are waiting for. So we just know when to tell our clients absolutely anything within these dates need to be canceled or go virtual. Anything else we're advising to brainstorm and strategize, because there could be a possibility of cancellation or postponement or going virtual. So we are right now strategizing.
Well, our all big meetings have been canceled or postponed through April 30th, with the exception of a dermatology conference, which the chair is just fabulous and had exhibitors and all kinds of things. But he is going virtual on April 18th. I think this Saturday, our CME director told me. So, and the exhibitors were so kind that they kept their support and all that. So we appreciate that. But so we really don't have a drop dead date that we can't, it just keeps moving. So it's tough.
Yeah, I would say that's pretty much the same with us. I mean, the state of Massachusetts has said that we're in a shelter in place until May 4th. It's unclear what's going to happen after May 4th. We did just actually last week canceled a meeting that had been planned, a multi-day, like a 2-week meeting on the Cape in Massachusetts, planned for July, and that's been canceled. They're going to do some of it, very truncated version of it, virtually. For myself, I had to ask for a change of scope for a large project that I've got, and I turned 5 live meetings into webinars that will take me 1 a month between now and August, just to sort of, in part, take the pressure off myself to, so that I don't have to scramble in the fall and come up with 10 live meetings suddenly.
Yeah, that's what I'm kind of concerned about. Our poor director and CME department, if they are postponed, you still have those that wanted to be in the fall. We're planning on being in the fall anyway. It's just, that's going to be tough to have double.
Yeah, I heard that on the news. There was an interview program I was listening to on the local news here where, if everybody is planning, and this was about the arts, all of the fundraising galas that were supposed to be happening, and if everybody's planning for something to happen, in September or October, that's not going to be good either. So it's a complicated situation, and I think the bottom line is none of us knows. Of course, that's what we're in as Beta says, the COVID era.
Yeah.
Have either of you done the conversion from live to virtual, and if so, how's that going?
Yeah, I teach in an online program that we do everything meetings, and it is designed that way. So it's interesting that we've been sort of like consultants to face-to-face faculty members, CPD activities, people in the hospital, on best ways to interact with your learners and all that, because we have to design our courses that way. And people here have been great. There's a committee that just kind of ran to all corners of the campus and helped people, so that really your only worry as a presenter and a learner really is to worry about the content, because and that's a blessing. We were prepared, and that is great. But I think being at an academic medical center, we were ready for those type things and virtual learning anyway. So everybody's been wonderful. And if it could not be done, if it was skills based, then it's just postponed until a time that we can touch each other.
Right. Vita, how are yours going?
Actually, they're going really well. Indiana University as a whole, I mean, we are, the School of Medicine is the largest school of medicine in the country, but also Indiana University as a whole was an early adopter of online learning or hybrid courses. So I myself taught those for years. So going online has not been that great of a challenge for our school as a whole. And in the School of Medicine, we were actually doing online learning with simulation and all of that. So that's just ongoing right now. So I have to say that we've been lucky because we have been at the forefront of virtual learning or this hybrid. Of course, our face-to-face meetings and classes are very important. So there are some elements that you just miss online, but our faculty are working really hard to make sure that they are substituting for those elements. So it's been fairly smooth.
Great, good. That's fabulous to hear. I'm going to throw out just a final question. I know we're in our last 5 minutes or so, and Scott, I'm sure you have some final words for folks. But just this is a little bit more global, and I'd love to hear Beta and Elizabeth what you think about what can we as the CME community do now to best support the clinicians in our hospitals. I know I'm in an academic medical center also, but I'm feeling a little bit like we haven't had an opportunity to do as much as we'd like to. We feel like we want to do more for the clinicians, but we're not sure what that is at the minute because they're in the trenches. So I'm wondering whether you guys have thoughts about that.
I would say that one, just in some cases, get out of the way and don't be the barrier or stumbling block for some really good learning and some new information to come out there, because we know right now we're hungry for all kind of information in this particular situation anyway. But I'll just say this one thing. I listened to things earlier. I think Brian McGowan mentioned it, and so did maybe Nancy Painter in her presentation. She had a slide that said, out of adversity comes opportunity. And my son was a high school baseball pitcher, and it just always made me so nervous when he was pitching. And so those times when bases were loaded, game was tied, and he had thrown 3 balls, I would just about go into a frenzy. And my husband would say, it's an opportunity for greatness. And so that would calm me down just a little bit for a few seconds. But I think that's where we are now. We have the opportunity to help and facilitate this information coming out, to those who need it, those who are on the front line and who need this education and need those skills and need the new information about new research. So that would be what I would say, is just see this, as Brian said, as an opportunity, a good opportunity that we can be of assistance. I don't put on scrubs, and I'm not dealing with patients. And so this can be that time when we help those little things and get out of the way so that they can do that.
Great. Thank you. Beta?
Yeah, so on top of that, I think I want to emphasize facilitation more than anything. There's not anything that we can clinically do, but we can definitely simplify the process, the application processes. I was really happy to see that ACCME came out with this expedited form that we can help our clients. We are definitely doing a lot more of the administrative processes in the background. If we can take on some tasks that the committee completed before, for example, negotiating contracts, reviewing slides, I think those are how we can definitely facilitate and also become a source, a local regional source where we put all of our COVID-19 activities that people just know where to come and get this information as well. So those are the little things I think that we can do to alleviate some of the pressure and definitely move towards accrediting these activities.
Wonderful. Thank you.
All right. Well, I think that's sort of a great note on which to end this session and to end a very unusual CME Palooza Spring, certainly. So I would like to, first of all, thank Alana and Beta and Elizabeth and Phil and Tina and Jim for participation in this session, and certainly all of our panelists. Everyone has been really cooperative throughout the planning for our spring meeting as things have been changing so quickly. So we're grateful to everyone in the CME community for that. So for people who are watching this session either live or the recorded version, there's a short survey on top of the live tab on our CME Palooza website that'll help us plan for the future. And with that, once again, I would like to thank everyone for watching CME Palooza Spring. We will be back in the fall, Wednesday, October 14th, hopefully under very different circumstances, but under a very similar online, virtual, live, free format. So thank you once again, and hope everyone stays safe. And we hope to see you under better circumstances in 6 months.